Jeremy Corbyn!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish the England team all the best in the tournament in Russia and hope it goes really, really well. This week, Mr. Speaker, is an England win. This week is National Carers Week, Mr. Speaker, and I want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to those thousands of usually unpaid carers whose commitment to family and friends too often goes unrecognised. Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister pointed out, tomorrow marks 1 year on the anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire. I'll be meeting families again tomorrow at their silent march. But the sad truth and reality is that many of them are still waiting for the security of a permanent home 1 year on from that disaster. Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister met President Donald Trump last week, did she do as the Foreign Secretary suggested and ask him to take over the Brexit negotiations?
Mr. Davis, you're a senior and supposedly cerebral member of the House. Well, in a leap year anyway, you must attempt to recover your composure, man. I'm worried about you, and I'm worried for you. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the Brexit negotiations, I might remind the honourable gentleman, that before December, Labour cast doubt on whether we would get a joint report agreed. We did. Before March, he cast doubt on whether we'd get an implementation period, and we did. But I wanted, Mr. Speaker, if I may, just to respond to the comment that the right honourable gentleman made about the very important subject of providing those who were the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire with permanent homes. Just so that I can make clear to the House, 203 households were in need of a new home. Every household has received an offer of temporary or permanent accommodation. 183 have accepted an offer of a permanent home. But I just wanted to say this, because it isn't just about the buildings. It's not just about the bricks and mortar of a home. People who suffered that night are having to rebuild their lives. Many of them lost somebody, members of their families with whom they had been living and making a home for years. They lost all their possessions. They lost their mementos. They lost anything that reminds them of the person they loved. When they move into that new home, they will be restarting their lives. And I wanted to pay tribute to all the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire for the strength and dignity that they have shown.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, I too pay tribute to the families for all that they've been through and all the fortitude they've shown. But sadly, the reality is that some of them have still not got a permanent home to move into. It's very important for the mental well-being of everybody. They have somewhere they can call home and they know it is their home. Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister confirmed we would leave the European Union in March 2019 and the transition would end in December 2020. But we now know the government is working on the basis that transition could continue for a further year till December 2021. Could you be clearer today? Which December are we talking about?
No, the right honourable gentleman is quite wrong in his, the way he has put this to the House, so let me be clear to the House. I think what he's trying to talk about is the backstop arrangement that we have agreed. Let's be very clear what this backstop is. This is an arrangement that will be put in place in the circumstances in which it is not possible to put the future new customs arrangement in place by the 1st of January 2021, and it is there to ensure that if those new customs arrangements are not in place, that we are able to continue on the basis that there is no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. We are working to make sure that the future customs arrangements overall deal with the issue of ensuring no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. We don't want the backstop to be necessary. We are working to ensure that we can have our future customs arrangements in place on the 1st of January 2021.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, I'm not really sure whether it's a backstop or a backslide that she's talking about here. Last week I asked the Prime Minister, and I'm sorry to bring this subject up again because it's probably quite painful for her, but when is the government's Brexit white paper going to be published? Because she did say it would be published before the June EU Council summit. Is that still the case?
No, I didn't actually say that. I said the white paper would be published, and we will be publishing it. We will be bringing ministers together. Just calm down. We will be bringing ministers together after the June Council, and the white paper will be published thereafter.
Mr. Speaker, it gets ever more confusing because at the weekend the Cabinet Office Secretary told the BBC that it would not now be until July. Can I offer a solution to her? Instead of worrying about this white paper on which the Cabinet would have to agree, how about making it a green paper in which all their disagreements are in the open and we can all make a comment on it? But if the government does not, Mr. Speaker, as looks likely, have its detailed proposals ready for the June summit, surely the Prime Minister can't be going to Brussels without anything to negotiate on. So is she going to seek a delay to that summit while the government decides what its position actually is?
Perhaps I could just help the right honourable gentleman. The June European Council is not a summit about the Brexit negotiations. There will be many issues that the European Union leaders will be discussing at the June European Summit, including the important issue of sanctions against Russia. I will be pressing to ensure that we maintain sanctions against Russia because the Minsk agreements have not been put in place, and indeed I think there are some areas where we should be enhancing that sanctions regime. He says that my right honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, said that the white paper would be published in July, and that's different from what I've just said. I have to say to him, after the June European Council is July. But if he wants to talk about differences of opinion, I'll tell him what division really is. It's Labour members. It's all very well the Deputy Leader pointing like that. Division is members of the Labour Party circulating instruction manuals on how to deselect all the Labour MPs sitting behind it.
Mr. Speaker, you've got to face the fact. You've got to face the fact there may now be a meltdown. Mr. Speaker, they're not actually my words, but those of the Foreign Secretary, even as his fellow Cabinet Ministers are preparing people for the government's negotiations, which he clearly thinks are going to end in disaster. And last week he also took aim at the Treasury, who's sitting absolutely next to him, calling them the heart of Remain. He criticised them, saying what they don't want is friction at the borders. What they don't want any disruption to the economy. So does the Prime Minister back the Foreign Secretary in wanting more friction and more disruption to the economy?
Let's talk about the positions on this issue. Labour said they wanted to do new trade deals. Labour said they wanted to do new...
Order. I want to hear both the questions and the answers. And as the record shows, I don't require any assistance in this matter. As the record shows, that will always happen, however long it takes. And there's a lot of noise and much gesticulation from members on both sides of the House. But I want to hear the questions and I want to hear the answers. The Prime Minister, we're grateful.
The honourable member for Bolsover is absolutely right. We're in government, not Labour. And we've set out our position on the border. But what we see is a Labour Party that said it wanted to do trade deals and now wants to be in a customs union that will stop that. They said they wanted to control our borders and now they want free movement. They said they would respect the referendum and now they won't rule out a second referendum. And that's the difference between us. The Conservative Party in government are going to deliver on the will of the British people.
Mr. Speaker, in the parallel universe inhabited by the Foreign Secretary, you're apparently not respecting the referendum result unless you want friction at the borders and disruption of the economy. Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet is divided and they're briefing against each other. They're even whispering during Prime Minister's question time. And the Prime Minister has been left with no white paper on which to negotiate. Last week, the transition period was delayed by a year in the space of 24 hours. And yesterday, a deal with her backbenchers was reneged on within hours. Meanwhile, the economy is weakening. Industry is increasingly alarmed at the sheer ineptitude of her government. How much more damage is the Prime Minister going to do to this country before she realises the important thing is to get a deal for the people of this country, not one to appease the clashing giant egos of her Cabinet?
It's the Labour Party in opposition that are trying to frustrate Brexit. It's the Labour Party that are trying to stop us getting a deal for the British people. This government will deliver on Brexit. This government will deliver a Brexit for jobs. This government will deliver a Brexit that is good for Britain. And if he wants to talk about the economy, the last Labour government left office with 500,000 more people out of work than when they went into office. What's happened under the Conservatives? We have seen nearly 500,000 more people in work just over the last year. That's Conservatives delivering on a Britain that's fit for the future. And I've heard that the Right Honourable Gentleman is trying to organise a music festival, Labour. I'll pass over the fact it's going to have a solidarity tent, which obviously won't have any Labour MPs within it. But I have to say to him, I don't know if all members of the House are aware of the headline act at Labour Live. The headline acts at Labour Live are the Shadow Chancellor and the magic numbers. Just about sums them up.